Hello, good evening to you. Welcome. This is Ghana Tonight. We are live from our news up at Desawe Kanda, also live on 2-3 Ghana on Facebook, DSTV channel 279, all across the world on 3news.com. I am Alfred Concept. Tonight, President Akufo-Addo wants raging arguments about free senior high school policy ceased and the focus placed on improving it. But how does the government intend to improve the policy when it does not want it reviewed? So it is a matter of nomenclature, English language, really. We'll have a conversation on this matter with the right people tonight. Stay with us. Also, still on the State of the Nation address in agriculture, President Akufo-Addo touts what he says are successes of the government's Planting for Food and Jobs program, phase 2. But is that really the case on the ground? We have a conversation with some of the key stakeholders in the agri sector. So tonight, stay with us and we get straight to the ground to do a reality check of what the president has said today. Also, on our manifesto check tonight, we are in Keta in the Volta region to check out the port the new patriotic party promised in the 2020 manifesto to see the level of progress, the Keta Port. Stay with us. We have a conversation on Ghana Tonight. As always, you are an integral part of the conversation. Let's hear from you. Very, very interactive. For those of you watching us in Keta, you can also send pictures and videos, at least to confirm what we're going to be talking about tonight. As always, we do this with you in mind and at heart. The hashtag is Ghana Tonight on Facebook and X. Let's get talking. I am Alfred Okanse. Let's settle for Ghana Briefs.
Ghana's fortunes are on the rise following the economic downturn, according to President Akufo-Addo. That was the president's summary of the account of his stewardship in his annual sessional address to Parliament.
We stumbled, but we are rising again. We were bruised, but we are healing. We have recovered our footing. We have dusted ourselves off. And now we face tomorrow with confidence.
Meanwhile, the minority expressed disappointment that the president failed to address youth unemployment and corruption, but the majority stated that it was a message of hope.
A man who rode on the wings of corruption and unemployment and promised to deal with corruption and unemployment. In his last but one State of the Nation address, speaking for over 2 hours, he failed to use the word corruption. He failed to use the word unemployment.
The president placed a lot of emphasis on the education sector more than the other sectors. That goes to indicate the commitment of the president in investing in human capital. Between 2017 and now, the president has invested over 114 billion cedis into ensuring that human capital is developed, that access is created for the child of the poor and the child of the rich.
Many youth who have finished school, nurses are at home, teachers at home, a lot of the youth don't have jobs for this country. And it's of security concerns. On his main propaganda, Agenda 111, he missed to really tell us how many have they finished, how many would be commissioned. He was silent on that. Ghana, we don't have hope.
A demolition exercise at Gomoa Budumburam in the Gomoa East District of the Central Region has left many Liberian nationals stranded. Additionally, most of them have lost thousands of properties due to this exercise undertaken by Nananum of the Gomoa Fete traditional area.
Okay, maybe next week or 2 months time we coming, you should be able to pack your things to be able to leave. But you cannot come and jump on early morning while people sleeping in the house and you breaking houses on them. It will not be good.
They spoil my house. I got 4 children. This early morning, before I could make my mind, just see the chatter, before I could make my mind, everything just, I don't really know that, I'm really confused.
The chiefs and people of Aguna Kwanyako in the Aguna East District of the Central Region have protested against an attempt by the Minerals Commission to give concession to a company to mine close to the town's water treatment plant.
nkrata eba no afune nda mineral commission ochira mineral commission adechia mineral commission
We are fed up of the documents coming from Mineral Commission giving people permission to mow on our land.
A human rights coalition, the Big 18, in collaboration with the Center for Democratic Development, CDD Ghana, is calling on President Akufo-Addo to not assent to the promotion of human sexual rights and Ghanaian family values bill when passed by Parliament in its current state. Board Chair of the CDD, Professor Audrey Gajepo, addressing the media in Accra, noted the bill, when passed, will infringe on the fundamental human rights of many, including the media, as enshrined by the 1992 Constitution.
Any person that uses the media to broadcast or advocate on this topic faces a prison sentence of up to 3 years. This places a heavy restriction on journalists, bloggers, influencers, and various social media users who produce or publish content, especially those who work in the field of human rights.
Well, there's more news on 3news.com. Make some time and visit 3news.com. This is Ghana Tonight. Coming up next. President Akufo-Addo has affirmed that the president is the sole preserve of authority, executive authority, and ultimate responsibility under the country's governance architecture. Now, some have indicated, based on this statement coming up next, in a seeming confirmation of a similar view taken by the vice president. If you recall, Dr Bawumia outlining his vision statement, the president said cabinet and ministers are only advisors. Now, coming up next here on Ghana Tonight, this is the issue that we're getting into. With this statement that was made by the president during the State of the Nation address today, does it absolve Dr. Bawumia of any blame for that matter? That's a conversation tonight. We want to kickstart the State of the Nation address analysis. And President Akufo-Addo has affirmed that the president is the sole preserve of executive authority and an ultimate responsibility under the country's governance structure. Now, what that statement meant is one that has been subjected to a lot of meaning as to whether indeed many will take the view that Vice President Dr. Bawumia, in outlining his vision statement, made the point that executive authority rests with the president. And some made up the point as well that that was to absolve him of any ultimate responsibility whatsoever in the state of the economy as chair of the economic management team. This is what the president said today in response to that. Take a look.
Mr. Speaker, the president and his appointees are not universally loved. It would be strange and unproductive if they were. It is probably worthwhile making what I consider to be important observations at this stage on some of the issues in our public discourse in the lead up to the elections for a new president. Under the Constitution, the executive power of the state is vested in the President of the Republic. He or she is the executive. There's no ambiguity about where the buck stops when it comes to responsibility for what happens in the government. It stops with the president. He or she has ultimate responsibility. It would be an unwise president that would pretend to have all the answers and refuse the advice of his officials. But the fact remains that the president holds the executive power. The cabinet, the ministers of state, all act ultimately in an advisory manner. Of course, the member of the government might take an idea be it generated by the president or the official or a committee, and turn it into a huge success, and the honors will be claimed or shared where public perception falls. But ultimately, the president is responsible and therefore takes the credit or the blame for whatever happens in his or her government.
President Akufo-Addo there. The president takes all the blame for whatever happens in his government. Does this statement in any way put to rest the conversation about shared responsibility and the fact that the chair of the economic management team, the vice president or the flag bearer of the NPP, must also be held responsible for the economic quagmire that we've been through over the period? Well, Professor Bafo-Addo is a governance expert and a former United Nations advisor on governance. Now, when this matter came up, we started a conversation with him. At this point, with the president's statement as well, let's go back to him. He's joining us on Zoom. Professor Bafo-Addo, good evening. Thank you very much for joining us here on Ghana Tonight. Once again, does this statement by the president put to rest the conversation about shared responsibility about this economic situation with respect to Dr. Bawumia's role in that matter, or it does not? It still leaves some questions unanswered.
Well, I think that statement is an oversimplification of an issue that is burdening all Ghanaians. In his address, as you can tell, he did spend some time on the judiciary, which is one key branch of government, and also somehow on the legislature. But most of the difficulties that people are facing in this country are the creation of the executive. So once he said the buck stops with me as the president, I wish he had gone further to explain to citizens those critical issues that he thinks concern citizens that he wasn't able to deal with. I think that would be more appropriate. But he was too short on his presentation on the executive in terms of the challenges that the executive has, and more importantly for me, the need for some reforms within the executive that the Constitution has given us. And also, when he even referred to the review of the Constitution, he seemed to have expressed some kind of satisfaction with the status quo, saying that, look, we don't have to tamper with the Constitution, insinuating some people who are advocating for the change and all. I think that for his almost 8 years in that seat, he should be the first person to know that there are serious problems with the Constitution regarding the extensive nature of power that the Constitution gives to the president. So now that he's leaving, this would have been a fine opportunity to tell citizens some of the limitations and the challenges so that he could have made at least some broad recommendations on how, as a people altogether, we can seek to reform the Constitution. If he didn't want to take the lead as president, at least on his departure, should tell us what he thinks from his experience, what needs to be changed, but he failed to do that. So I think the simple statement of the buck stopping on his desk does not give any sense of insight into how the buck gets there to the desk and how he deals with it when it gets to his desk.
I see. But in fact, he also, after saying that executive power is vested in only the president, but it would be, he continues that it would be unwise for the president to pretend that he has all the answers and refuse the advice of his officials. And it clearly indicating that there is always that point where advice is considered. But I recall that narrative at a point that Dr. Bawumia may have recommended or giving advice on, for instance, the e-levy, but that was rejected. And so, for instance, he cannot be held accountable for that as well. Now, taking into consideration this statement by the president, can that suffice?
Well, you see, this is a very interesting situation. His vice president, with whom he has ruled the country for 8 years, is seeking to be president. And the public and he himself knows that there are so many policies of his government that have not been satisfying to the public. And of course, he worked together with the vice president. By seeking the presidency, the vice president has to find a clever way to distance himself from some of the failed policies. I think that would be a dilemma for any vice president seeking the office of the president whilst the incumbent is still in power. And when people know so well that you've been closely linked to some of the key policies, especially in the area of the economy. So it's a difficulty both of them are facing. How Dr. Bawumia is able to extricate himself from the failures of this government, and whether the outgoing president, the current president, can really isolate him from his failures. That is what I think has been a conundrum for the two of them. So, of course, he cannot come publicly to get Bawumia to be responsible for anything. And truly, he's right. As the president, the buck stops on his desk. But because of the prominence of the vice president in the economic policies of his government, it's still difficult for anyone to believe that, in fact, he wasn't. And if there was a disagreement between Bawumia and the president over economic policies, it was never made public. So we are not sure whether it did happen or not. And that is where I think there's a gray area there as to where we can really be definitive about what Bawumia is responsible for and not. But the fact still remains that as a president, he is the driver. Whether the vice president was a mate or co-driver is a different discussion.
I see. But you see, how much of good would it be to Dr. Bawumia in this instance? For instance, that the president comes and says, you know what, blame me for the economic crisis. I take full responsibility. The buck stops with me for whatever praise or blame there is. But then you also have the vice president, who's the vice president to the president, saying that, yes, I admit there's some situation, but blame me for it. This vice president is a flag bearer seeking an election ahead of us on the ticket of the same party that the president is on, who is admitting that, well, all is not well, but I take the blame. How much good is it going to be to the candidature of Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia in this strategy that the president takes, that he wants to absolve all the blame to himself?
I think it depends on how his skills in statecraft will be in terms of couching his statements and new policies to show some kind of difference between himself and policies that have not been very successful. I think Bawumia is in a very tight situation, tight corner, I should say, because on one hand, he cannot publicly denounce the policies of the president, which he was part of. At the same time, he's aware that certain policies have not been very good, and he cannot carry that to the campaign trail. So what does he do? That is a difficulty. But I think if he's bold enough to say bluntly to Ghanaians that, look, yes, these areas of economic policies, I disagree, but I don't call the last shot. My disagreement was expressed, but in the end, the president decided to go on his own way, which is the right thing to do anyway. It's legally right for the president to, as he said, the buck stops with him. I think on every policy matter, there will be multiple sources of advice. What the president decides to take, whether the one from the vice president or from the economic committee or the state council of state or any private consultants that he may have, ultimately, it's the president's choice. It's his decision because he's elected to rule us. So as I say, whilst it's difficult for most of us to believe that the vice president is not culpable in these matters. Truly, is the president. It was the president's policies. The only caveat here is that amongst many vice presidents that you have gotten, Dr. Bawumia has been the most prominent on issues of the economy in the country. That's why the weakness or perhaps the failures in the economy are being tagged on him. He cannot run away from that. That is so prominent. He cannot run away from that.
Professor Akufo-Addo, I appreciate your time. Thank you. Thank you very much for joining us here on Ghana Tonight. He's a former governance advisor at the United Nations, governance expert, Professor Akufo-Addo. Thank you. This is Ghana Tonight. Coming up next, still staying with the President of the State of the Nation address. He wants the raging arguments about free senior high school ceased and the focus placed on improving it. But how does that intention, indeed, of improving the policy come to fruition when the conversation about reviewing it is not one that government wants to also give any hearing to? But let's hear exactly what the president said about the free senior high school policy in the State of the Nation address earlier today.
As a mere political slogan that must be demonized, but it is in fact a transformative program that has broken myths and liberated minds. It is humbling on one hand and frightening on the other to think of the sheer number of talents the free SHS has unearthed that would otherwise have ended their formal education at BECE. I know we will get more engineers, doctors, architects, scientists, writers, and poets out of the increased numbers of those attending senior high school who will go into further education. Even if they stop at high school, at senior high school, imagine what 1 million more secondary school educated young people will do to our self-confidence and the value of our workforce. That alone makes free SHS worthwhile. I'm proud that the MPP government under my leadership has been able to bring this transformative policy into our education system. Mr. Speaker, I believe the success of the free SHS policy has answered its critics, and the arguments about it should cease, and we should simply concentrate on finding ways to improve it. I'm particularly glad that the fears about lowering of standards have been allayed. Refreshingly, we witnessed through the 2023 batch of free SHS students the best WACC results in over a decade.
So that's President Akufo-Addo then. Let's welcome some key voices in this education space. And Angel Kabono is president of the National Association of Graduate Teachers, NAGRAT. Also, Kofi Asare is executive director of the Africa Education Watch, one of the foremost society in this education space, not only in Ghana, but across the continent. Gentlemen, good evening. Thank you very much for joining us here on Ghana Tonight. Start off with you, Mr. Kabono. This is the president's statement, now inviting a conversation on how to improve the free senior high school policy. What are the areas that you have continuously, as NAGRAT, asked that attention be paid, at least for a possible review of this policy?
The argument will have to be there to identify ways to improve the policy, because it's a contest of ideas and a contest of minds. So people will have to engage in discussions so as to arrive at acceptable ways of improving the policy. The policy we've been talking about, always we talk about a review. And when we talk about a review, we are not looking at a situation where one person sits somewhere and that person alone talks about review. We talk about review of bringing people together from all walks of life. You know, people, educationists, people in enterprise, people in the media, community leaders, church leaders, so that we all sit down and see what type of free senior school system we can talk about. And then again, let us also get it clear. Education in a country is not limited to free, it's not limited to secondary school. More importantly is the provision of public basic school in the various communities. And that public basic school should be school worthy of attending, where we give qualitative education worth its salt. Today, from what we see and what we are experiencing, the public basic schools are getting aground, and they are giving in to business-minded operators in private schools. And our governments are looking on to allow this dissipation to continue. Well, when we go like this, we'll be worse off for it in a few years to come.
So clearly, some level of equality may have been achieved, but equity is still a problem. At least if what Africa Education Watch put out yesterday is anything to go by, that you have parents still spending almost 2,000 cedis on their children. That's the least, 2,000 cedis on their children who are going into first year. And in fact, even more. And you have some also, the day students, over 4,000 Ghana cedis as well. So we'll get that clarity from Kofi in a bit. That clearly there is a lot more that needs to be done, Mr. Kabonu, to ensure that the policy achieves the ultimate objective of the financial barrier not being the reason why someone will be denied secondary education, isn't it?
Well, we have achieved high turnout. People have taken advantage of the free senior high school. But like I said, senior high school is only one aspect of the three aspects of education in any country. So for us to zero in and emphasize on secondary school, we are beginning to ignore the other ones, which is basic school and tertiary. And we need to look at all these holistically in our own interest.
Governor, stay with me because Kofi, Africa Education Watch Executive Director is joining us. Kofi, it's always good to have you. First off, let's establish a few things. Based on that research that you put out, how much does a parent spend on the average for the first year senior high school student to get into the day and the boarding, those two specific situations, please?
On the average, parents are spending about over 4,400 cedis, and the government is spending about 1,200 cedis. And so government is taking care of about 23% of the cost, and parents are taking care of about 77% of the costs.
So is it specific to either day or boarding? Is it for the boarding student?
The average Ghanaian student is a boarding student. And so this 4,200 plus that parents are spending constitutes the cost of prospectus, and then the cost of non-prospectus items. I'm talking about provisions and other provisions, transport, keeping money, and then personal effects. They add up to the total amount. But this is the minimum. This is never the...
so the 4,400 is the minimum that a parent spends on a fresh student going to senior high school?
Yeah, this is the minimum, because I can tell you that this year, for instance, Edward has a couple of children in senior high schools that we are taking care of who are needy. And the one at Presec, we so far spent in excess of 6,200 in the first 2 months of the term of the academic year. Before it is spent over 6,000. And so I'm not talking about the semester, let alone the academic year. So these are modest estimates between 2017 and 2021.
I see.
So averagely, no parent will spend less than 6,000 a year in senior high school. But government is not spending more than 1,200 because government allocates 2,000, 2,002, 1,008 a year per student. But at the end of the year, government ends up spending only 70% of what it allocates because of limited funding for the policy. So That is virtually the situation.
So, Kofi, then talking about the president's statement today, that the argument now should be on how to improve on this policy. We cannot talk about improvement without talking about specific reviews of certain aspects of the program, can we?
Yes. So improving, only the president understands what he means by improve. Maybe it means to him buying tablets for senior high schools, and then building STEM schools, expanding infrastructure in many schools, and then also adding more items to what government is even paying, and if you like, increasing the number of students who are going to secondary school. Everyone in the way they define improvements. So what he sees as improvement may be different from what we see as improvement. But the point I want to make is that the president attempts to see the bigger picture of the free senior school policy. He talks about producing a critical mass of youth who will have implications on the quality of labor force. He mentions that. That is the one big picture he looks at, so that Ghana will be seen as producing high quality youth, ready for the world of work or something like that. Now, on that angle, I agree with the president that if you increase access to secondary education, yes, you create opportunities for improving the quality of labor market entrance. But you see, within that bigger picture, the president must also appreciate that our secondary education system is producing more grammar students than technical students. Only about 12% of students in our senior high schools are doing technical or skills-oriented subjects. Majority of them are doing grammar. And so if you are producing about 450,000 annually in secondary, and you have a situation where only 40% is moving to tertiary, then it means that about 250,000, 250,000 senior high school graduates are not moving anywhere. They will become unemployed because they don't have the skills to become primary labor market entrants. So, that bigger picture is not big enough for Ghana, because if you produce that number every year, and they don't have the skills to participate or to enter the labor market, they will become a national security threat. That is one angle. The other angle that I want the president to look at is that the president should not, the policy has made good progress, admitted several times. But the president is overly seeing equitable access within the context of the percentage of students who are leaving junior high school today and entering senior high school. That has increased by about 10 percentage points.
Right.
From 60 to 70% between 2017 and now. But I don't want to see equitable access alone within that lens. It is very, very constricted and narrow. I want to see equitable access within the lens of the number of students who enter primary school and end up entering senior high school in the 5 northern regions and OT, up to out of 10 students who enter primary school, only 3 are likely to get to secondary school because of dropout factors within the way. I'm repeating myself again. In the 5 northern regions and OT, out of 10 students who enter kindergarten 1, only 3 are likely to make it to secondary school and enjoy free senior high school because of dropout factors. In these regions, almost half of the primary schools do not have junior high schools. So after primary 6, they drop out. Or they have to commute 10, 15 kilometers to the nearest community and they give up. And so the point I want to make is that I want to draw the president's attention to the fact that enhanced equitable access to secondary education is not seen within the context of primary to secondary transition, junior high school to senior transition, but within the context of basic school to secondary transition, such that we must be concerned that very few students in the most deprived regions in Ghana are having an opportunity to even complete basic school and let alone enter secondary. Only 3 out of 10. And so if we want to enhance equitable access, for me, what we need to do after 7 years of senior high school, free senior high school, and the experiences we have got, is that we need to invest in basic education transition, invest in basic education retention, such that the infrastructure gap is bridged, such that we are able to retain as many as we can through primary school to secondary school. If at the national level, 7 out of 10 or 7.5 out of 10 are making it from primary to senior high school, at least in these 6 deprived regions, we must put in place the necessary interventions to ensure that in those regions too, 7.5 out of 10 are able to move from primary school to senior high school. That is where I will put the president in the palanquin and celebrate him for expanding equitable access in a manner that is not just happening in the urban areas, but also in the most deprived part of Ghana.
I tell you what, this conversation is going to continue. And this, Kofi, you know, we're in this together to ensure for the greater good that the education space is improved. I appreciate your time as always, Kofi. Thank you so much. Kofi Asare, Executive Director of the Africa Education Award, joining us here on Ghana Tonight. We're still staying with the President's State of the Nation address. Coming up next, the President has also been talking about development in the fishing sector, in which he says is for the welfare of the fisher folk. Key amongst them is the Jamestown, coming up next, the Jamestown Fishing Harbour, which he says is 88% complete. Now, this is an issue that we're getting into here on Manifesto Check because we're tying it into the other promises, specifically that relates to the Keta Port, for instance, the specific area. We've been to the Jamestown Harbour, for instance. We'll get you updates on that as well. But this is Manifesto Check. Welcome.
Mr. Speaker, we have not forgotten about the welfare and well-being of our fisher folk. My government has completed the construction of 12 coastal fish landing sites at Axim and Discove in the Western region, Moray, Mountford, Winneba, Senyabreku, Gomoa, Fete, Otuam, and Infantsiman in the Central region, Tessie and Osu in the Greater Accra region, and Keta in the Volta region. Additionally, I had the pleasure in May last year of commissioning the newly constructed Elmina Fishing Harbour in the Central region, much against the hopes of the naysayers. And God willing, soon this year, I will also commission the Jamestown Fishing Harbour, which currently stands at 88% complete and is expected to be ready by August 2024.
Well, welcome. This is Manifesto Check. And tonight we are highlighting the 2 things. The State of the Nation address, specifically what the President said today about the Jamestown Harbour. This is the fishing harbour, which he says by August this year, he's going to commission it 88% complete. Now, Dennis Paperi-Wadam is my colleague, Manifesto Checker, here on Ghana Tonight. It's good to have you as always, Dennis.
Always a pleasure being here, Alfred.
So you took a journey to the Jamestown Harbour?
Yes.
But first off, let's establish what is in the manifesto.
Well, so quite a number of things have been said about providing landing sites, fishing harbour, and then ports at various places.
Okay.
So what the President spoke about, the Jamestown, which is expected to be completed in August, is actually one of the many promises that were made in that regard. So then earlier in the week, we visited the site to see what progress of work had been done. Even before today, there had been word out there that the harbour was 60% complete, but we tried to see if indeed that was what was going on there. But we made our checks. Unfortunately, our reporter on the ground told us there was heavy security, but some way, somehow, they were able to get visuals. Let's take a look at what we were able to capture on camera, and if that's... And that was just yesterday. This is the Jamestown Harbour? Yes. So that's how it looks like. Currently ongoing there.
Okay. And so this is what the President talks about, the 88% completion.
And hopefully by
August,
it
should be ready for commissioning.
Yes.
This is the Jamestown as it looks. And these videos were taken specifically yesterday.
Yeah.
At about 2 p.m. yesterday. So this is what was happening. And not much has changed as of today. So yeah, there you have it.
Right. So like I was saying, it wasn't the only thing that was promised. The landing sites that the president himself mentioned today, together with one key thing, which was also a topical issue. It came up before the Public Accounts Committee. The very controversial, if I may say, Keta Port.
The Keta Port?
The Keta Port, yes. Now, that was captured in the 2020 Manifesto of the MPP. And the specific promise was that they would construct new harbors at Jamestown, one that we just saw, and in Accra and in Keta. Now, what they had done so far, this was by 2020, was that as part of government's program to develop a port at Keta in line with our commitments, the Ghana Ports and Harbors Authority is undertaking a feasibility study in the Keta area. An executive instrument declaring Keta area a port zone was signed in 2018. MOU has been signed with Diamond Cement to construct a jetty to handle clinker for its factory. So what this means is that even by 2020, when they were putting this together, all these things had been done. And of course,
so all of that,
yes,
the executive instrument
to declare the area as a port zone
was
an
done in
MOU signed with a
MOU
cement
had been
company
signed.
to start the basic works. This had been done as far back before 2020. And I would show you that even in 2019, in the 2019 financial, the budget statement, it was captured in there that the master plan is being developed for a new port at Keta. The president was said to have signed the executive instrument to declare the area, as was captured in the 2020 budget. So this was in 2019. So it means in 2019, there were already processes ongoing to set up this port. At least the legal framework by way of an executive instrument was already in motion. Now, in that same year, 2019, a director for this particular port was appointed. And that brought about a whole lot of controversy, because many were asking that we do not still have any work ongoing. The ports, in its real sense, in physical sense, did not exist at the time. Why do you have a director? So there was a lot of conversation. Government had cause to complain to explain what the reason for appointing Dr. Alexander Eduse as the director for the Keta Port. He himself had reason to explain the essence for his own appointment and what he was doing at the time. So in October 2020, he granted an interview where he had said that he was needed. And I quote him, "You need a director who will work with the technicians and the engineers from the Ghana Ports and Harbors Authority to ensure the purpose of the construction, exactly what is in the master plan of the Ghana Ports and Harbors Authority, based on the economics evaluated, is what is being developed and nothing else."
I see. So that was his work.
So that was his work. He goes on to say that you need a director to start the whole thinking process to bring that port to fruition. The director with his team will be able to develop what is perfect for the area designated. This was in 2020. The whole conversation then had been that there was feasibility studies ongoing. Fast forward to 2023, September. This is about 5 months ago.
Just
there was
last
a visit
year.
to the site, yes. Visit to the site. The director of the port was there. And guess what they were doing? They were doing an environmental impact assessment.
For the Keta Port.
For the Keta Port.
Okay.
So right from 2019, where the executive instrument was signed to declare the area as a port zone, all through to 2023, this is what we have.
So,
but of course, we also have visuals to show the current state of it.
Establish a few things. An MOU has been signed.
Yes.
Environmental impact assessment has been done.
Yes.
But what is happening at the Keta Port
actually ongoing
site?
Because the last meeting with the Public Accounts Committee, when it came up, the I think the sector minister, who was before the Public Accounts Committee, also mentioned that this particular process was still ongoing. The environmental impact assessment was still ongoing.
Okay, let's hear from him.
Sure.
Right? Let's hear from the at the Public Accounts Committee. just about a little over a week ago. Take a look.
Having done the market sounding, we are currently doing the environmental impact assessment, and that takes a bit of time just to take care of, all the necessary requirements asked by environmental protection agency standards.
That something is being done. How long does it take for a feasibility studies? If the project will take off, why appoint a whole director in charge of such a project?
This is not the place. This is not the place. Don't do these kind of things in this committee. Because you see, no, wait a minute.
Chairman, we told you respect.
I'm the ranking. Allow me also to
we told you respect.
What do you respect?
You allow Honorable Kalosai to
Look. Carlos, I'm saying that. No. But the point I'm making is that this question has been asked by a member, a friend, and it has been answered. And then Robson. What am I doing is not right? What you are doing is rather not right.
Well, so that was Hassan Tampole there before the committee, and also this back and forth. That's Nelson Roxon Dafiame Paul, who's MP for South Day, and this his constituency is quite close to the enclave that we're talking about.
That his constituents and people around that area have been reaching out to him to also ask how far with the port, and he's unable to explain to them what the circumstances. He thought that the deputy minister who was before the public accounts committee would have given them answers. But then again, we hit the ground to see the extent of work on the ground. Just so
at the Keta Port.
Yes, the Keta Port, or the site that is designated for that particular project. So let's take a look at that.
This is the site designated for the port.
Yes, so these are visuals that we got from that site.
We understand this container offices is what was set up for the on-site staff.
Exactly. Those who will be there doing the work.
So this is the office?
Precisely.
And that's the site?
So you can see the signpost there indicating that this is the site that's going to be used for the projects.
I see. So at least from the only fiscal structure we have there for this Keta Port is the containers.
Yes.
For the offices.
I mean, the video speaks for itself. Mm-hmm. That's the area that you see.
So this is a site for the Keta Port.
Yes, and from what the deputy minister had mentioned before, it means they are still doing the environmental impact analysis or assessment, which the minister even said that they do not know when it will end because that project is being undertaken by the EPA. So it may take quite some time before we have this particular port. But 2 years after the appointment of the director for the port, he had a brief media engagement where he had made some comparison to say that even Tema Port itself is still under construction. That the Takoradi Port itself is still under construction.
So in effect,
2 years in office, the expectation was that he seemed to suggest that it was impractical for people to expect that 2 years in office he would have been able to bring up. Let's hear that SOT.
I see.
The director of ports.
You have a video to that.
Yes.
Okay, let's see that.
Port is still being built. Takoradi Port that was built in 1928 is still being built. How do you expect Keta Port to start within 2 years? I've been around for 2 years. It is a process. If you don't do it right, you put a structure on quicksand.
Just going to put a
you
structure
don't do
on
it right,
quicksand.
You put a structure on quicksand.
But was there a timeline to this promise?
So this is the exact thing in the manifesto. I do not see any timeline here. But to be fair, 2019 to 2024 is some considerable time.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And not much is seen there except the containers with the air conditions in there for the offices.
Yeah.
But it's something that we'll keep an eye on. Guess what? Here on Manifesto Check is to ensure that this democracy makes sense in every way possible. This is Manifesto Check on Ghana Tonight. welcome back. This is Ghana Tonight. We're live on TV Ghana on Facebook. A number of you have been sending us messages on Manifesto check on the issues relating to the Keta Port. This is a matter that we're keeping the steam on to ensure some level of accountability. But this is what, just a quick recall, happened at the Public Accounts Committee with respect to this. And we're talking about the committee clothed with responsibility of ensuring that answers are given to certain projects that government is on. Take a look.
2019, the Ghana Port and Harbours Authority constructed project office in Keji in the Keta municipality at the location where the proposed Keta Port would be built to serve as a reference point for all developments associated with the Keta Port project. Subsequently, a director of the port, Dr. Alexander Yao Eduse Jr., was...
Nelson Rosendafiamekpo is a member of the Public Accounts Committee, and we played to you earlier that verbal interaction that they were having. They were going back and forth on the committee with respect to this particular Keta Port when the Hassan Tampoli and then also the ports, Ghana Ports and Harbours Authority Director General was before them. Now, can you hear me? Good evening. Thank you very much for joining us here on Ghana Tonight. First off, what was the back and forth at the Public Accounts Committee about when this Keta Port issue came up?
You know that the public accounts, after we interrogate, we get the opportunity to interrogate matters that are raised by the auditors, by convention, by practice. Members are allowed by the chairman or the chairperson to ask matters that are of public interest. And the matter of the Keta Port, Keta Seaport, is of tremendous concern to my people in the Volta region, as well as other Ghanaians, especially because we have, for the past 6 years or so, deliberately expended colossal amount of money on that project. And as we speak, we only have a wooden signboard with the site of Keta Seaport written on it, a white signboard with a blue paint with the writing on it, and 2 containers painted yellow and blue. That is Gapoha colors, about 100 meters away from the roadside. That's all. That's all the infrastructure there is on the site. So, as a concerned member of parliament and as a concerned indigene of the area, I decided, because I've been prompted by this evening, you need to come and see the tons of messages I received from our people, both home and abroad, regarding the questions I asked today. They want to know how much government has expended on the personnel that have been supposedly recruited or employed for the feasibility phase of this Keta Seaport, including how much we have spent so far on a certain director who is at post and earning monthly wages for this project. Then the minister said that because he did not anticipate this question, he hasn't got the figures at hand, which is okay. As a committee, we could ask him to provide us the figures later on by way of a formal communication, or we could have asked him to come back at another time. But my brother, the Deputy Minister for Water Resources and Sanitation, the Honorable Chinia, thought that wasn't the forum for me to ask that question. And I asked him, which other forum is available? Because as Parliament as an organ, we have several fora to exercise our oversight responsibilities. And committee meetings is one such forum. So clearly I told him that it appears that he doesn't appreciate our standing orders. He doesn't appreciate how how Parliament exercises its oversight.
Right, and that's an issue that certainly we would be asking more from the committee, the Public Accounts Committee, of going forward. Thank you, especially how much has been spent so far even on this project. On behalf of the rest of the team, Nelson Ross and Dafemi Port, thank you for joining us here on Ghana Tonight. Thank you as well for staying with us here on Ghana Tonight. Join us same time tomorrow for another conversation. My name is Alfred Kanse. Do have a good night.
Ghana Tonight.